Welcome to the Memory Improvement Seminar. Before we get started, I have just a couple questions for you. How many of you just think about doing a little bit of studying and already you're tired? Can I see your hands? How many of you are sitting there, you're reading one of your books, you get to about the third page and you can't help but notice you don't even know what's on the first page? Let me see those hands. Hey, has this ever happened? You're sitting there, you're watching television, and it's a good show. But a thought occurs to you, so you jump up out of your chair, you dash into the other room, and you stop. And you're thinking to yourself, why am I here? Well, we're not only going to help you memorize for your schoolwork, we're going to help you in every aspect of your life, where you put your keys, where you parked your car, and how to be a better student. Because you start as a student from the time you're born until the day we die. So with that in mind, let me show you something. You see, that what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. In fact, if I were to walk up to you, sir, and I said, here's a chemical formula I want you to remember. Halfway through the chemical formula, if I slapped him across the face, I would make an impression, wouldn't I? I guarantee 5 years from now, he would not forget that chemical formula. He wouldn't forget me. He'd know the color of my tie, wouldn't he? Okay, so we're going to try to teach you how to have more fun when you're learning, because nothing is more frustrating than being bored. So with that in mind, I want you to go to what is strategy number 1. It's called the chain link system. Now, different systems are good for remembering different types of information. This first system is good for remembering a long list of items in sequential order. There are 3 rules. Rule number 1, visualize in your mind's eye a vivid picture. Now, what do I mean by that? Everybody close your eyes. Go ahead, close your eyes. And I want you to visualize an elephant. Now, visualize the elephant walking up to you. Now, I want you to visualize the elephant, the big old snout that comes around, he's breathing in your face. Okay, that will make a memorable picture in your mind. Everybody open your eyes. That's what we mean by visualization, seeing that picture in your mind's eye. Rule number 2, you want to see the 2 items you're trying to remember interacting in some way. For instance, if I said number 1 is an elephant and number 2 was a car, they need to be interacting in some way. You might visualize an elephant who's driving a car. Maybe a car is driving an elephant, but they need to be interacting in some way. Rule number 3, only have 2 items in each one of your visualizations at any given time. Let me illustrate. If number 1 was an elephant and number 2 was a car, you might visualize the elephant driving the car. That forms one visualization in your mind's eye. But now, after number 2, which is car, I might want you to remember that number 3 is the wall. Well, you would visualize the car smashing into the wall. But you might notice there is no longer an elephant involved. It's very important to only have 2 items in each one of your visualizations, for that will preserve sequence. So with that in mind, I am now going to give you a number of items in order that you will memorize. Most of you will get all 20 of these items correct, hearing it just one time through, unless. I was training at a leading law school in the United States. I'll never forget this one guy. He was sitting on the front row. He had his arms folded. He had this scowl on his face. I said, sir, what's wrong? He said, I can't believe I'm sitting here visualizing elephants blowing in my face. He's what I call the intellectual pickle sucker. The guy knew it all. Now, is he very teachable? No, he's not. In fact, at the end of that exercise, I said, sir, how many of those 20 items did you get correct? He said, 4. See, it doesn't work. I said, now, hold on a second. Because one of the other law students brought their 7-year-old with them. And I asked that little girl, well, how many of those 20 did you get correct? And she said, I remembered all 20. Does that mean I'm smarter than that guy over there? A mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's what? Open. Who said when you jump? Well, I guess if you thought about it, that is correct. Now let me give you another indication of why you might not remember all 20. You see, you've got to pay attention to what it is I'm telling you to visualize. If I get to the 6th or 7th item and you're thinking to yourself, are we going to get out of here on time? I've got a hot date tonight. Hey, if you're visualizing about your date tonight, we're lost the battle right there. So stay right with me and let's see how you all do. The first item, oh, by the way, put your pens and pencils down. I mean, that's a good try, but we'll test you in just a moment, okay? The first item I want everyone to remember is a bonnet. And here's how you're going to remember that. I want everybody to take your arms just like this. And I want you to tie a bonnet to your head. Go ahead, tie a bonnet to your head. Some of you are going like this. You ready? Go. Okay, we're done. I kid you not, I was in one seminar where I saw a young lady helping her friend on with her bonnet. Can you imagine that? So for the first item is bonnet. Now, after bonnet, I want you to remember giraffe. Now, I have a little cue here to help you remember that. I want you to visualize a bonnet on a giraffe's head. Now, close your eyes for just a second after each one of these pictures and see it in your mind's eye. Close your eyes, see the bonnet on the giraffe's head. After giraffe is telephone booth. Visualize a giraffe who is stuck in a telephone booth. After telephone booth is steamroller. I want you to visualize a steamroller crushing a telephone booth. In fact, listen to that steamroller crush that telephone booth. After steamroller is clipper ship. The steamroller went into the water and became a clipper ship. And you're theorizing, how does it float? After clipper ship is snake. Everybody close your eyes. I want you to see on a clipper ship thousands of snakes. Ladies, I didn't say get on the ship. Okay, now everybody open your eyes and I want you to see these 3 snakes at the top of a clipper ship. After snake is professor. You may have all known someone like this. Visualize a professor who is truly a snake. After professor is soup. I want you to visualize a professor at the bottom of a bowl of soup gurgling through his presentation. After soup is airplane. I want you to visualize an airplane landing in your Campbell's or Lipton soup. Don't go back and review. Stay right with me. You see an airplane landing in your soup. After airplane is hippo. This is now flying the friendly skies. The hippo airplane. Hippo. After hippo is dance. You thought you went to the people dance? You went to the hippo dance. See hundreds of hippos dancing together. After dance is basketball. I want every one of you to dance with a basketball. Do a little rumba, a cha-cha, but dance with a basketball. In fact, let's stop there. Let's see how you're all doing. What is it you put on top of your head? Everybody. And what's after bonnet? Giraffe. And the giraffe is in a? And it got hit by a? And after that is what? And what's all over that ship? And one of those snakes became a? And the professor's in some? What's after soup? And the airplane became a? And the hippos went to a? But you're dancing with a? After basketball is? You know that was the last one, didn't you? Give yourself a round of applause. You did a great job there. It is amazing how much your mind can file away and retrieve if you only know the technique for filing that information away. But now let me tell you about practical applications for that particular exercise. You see, that's the chain link system. For instance, let's suppose you have an essay type test, and you have a professor who's notorious for saying, I want you to list all 12 attributes of 17 characteristics concerning. Well, you could chain link each one of those characteristics or attributes one after another. In fact, let's talk about speeches. How many of you want to be proficient when you give a speech? Can I see your hands? Oh, absolutely. And you know what? I did a little bit of training with speech. You know the worst way to give a speech? Read it word for word off of a page. Does it come across boring? You know what's even worse? Memorize it word for word. And after that was, yeah, that's the worst way. The best way to give a speech is to go from topic to topic, expressing it in your own words. It comes across spontaneous. Well, why not chain link each one of those topics one after another through the presentation? Now you'll notice, let me step back for a second. You'll notice we started with simple objects. There's a reason for that. I have got to start with the basics. Could you imagine if I said, I want everybody to visualize a pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelial on your head. Now chain link that to a hyperpolysyllabic sesquipedalian. Brain overload, isn't that right? So we're going to start with the basics and then train you how to apply this to all of the different techniques you'll want to use. Here's another example. Serial recall. You know what that means? Remembering information in order. Maybe you have a little brother or sister, and you're trying to teach them all of the presidents of the United States in order. Well, you might start with Washington. How can you visualize Washington? Mom's doing the wash. In the wash are thousands of Adam's apples. You could chain link and you could teach your little brothers and sisters how to remember all of those presidents. Or how about this? You want to teach them all of the states in alphabetical order. Well, let's start with Alabama. You might visualize Bam Bam. And Bam Bam smashes the baked Alaska. For what state? Oh, Alaska. But the baked Alaska is melting in the desert. For what state? Arizona. And man alive, you could take them through all of the 50 states. Well, here's another example. Something dealing with procedures. Hey, maybe you're in pre-med. Maybe you're in computer science. And there's particular procedures you've got to follow in sequence. If you go out of sequence, it doesn't do you any good. You could chain link each one of those procedures one after another. Now, I'm going to give you examples of all of these as we progress, but let's go down to something like things to do. You know, I do this for a lot of professionals. Nothing is more frustrating to them than to get to the end of the day and forget to do something that had to be done that day. And you know what else they forgot? They forgot to look at their daily planner to see they were supposed to do it that day. So you know what I tell them to do? Look to the end of your nose. Can you visually connect something to the end of your nose? What could you put on the end of your nose? Could you put a battleship there? Could you put a computer? You could put whatever you want. So I say, hey, If there's something important you got to do today, put it on the end of your nose or shove it up your nose if you really want to make an impression, okay? But then, how many items could you connect to the end of your nose? Is there a limit? No, there's not. You can connect 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000. People have linked over 2,000 items one after another. It's limitless. Well, let's go down to goals. Now, this is for those of you that are progression-oriented. And I really think you are. Do you realize that less than 5% of this country will go out and do anything extra to educate themselves? In fact, less than 5% after high school or college will continue to educate themselves. So I think this is a progressive audience. But now, suppose you have goals. For instance, you might have a goal that you want to get to bed early every night. Now, that might be a fictitious goal with this group, but you would visualize a bed. And after that, you have a goal that you want to run around the track every morning. So guess what's running around the track? The bed. The bed is running around the track. Maybe one day you want to own a big, beautiful home. Well, have that running track go right through the middle of your beautiful home. I'll tell you something. If you visualize your goals in each and every day, you will be surprised how fast you start moving toward them. And finally, the shopping list. I wanted to add this for a reason. I do this for a lot of elderly ladies and gentlemen. I say to the ladies, if you're going shopping and you've got a pen and you've got a piece of paper, write it down. We're trying to teach you how to work smarter, not harder. You don't have to sit there and go, I now see the cabbage jumping into the sugar smacks. Oh, that would be entertaining, but it's not time. You know, the dullest pencil is still keener than the sharpest mind. It's like if you were to have an open book test at the end of the week on chemistry, and the professor told you, hey, you're going to be tested on these 50 chemical formulas, but it's an open book test. How many of you would actually memorize all 50 formulas if it was open book? You wouldn't. You know what you'd do? You would invest your time in trying to understand those chemical formulas. Because just because you memorized it, does that mean you understand it? No, absolutely not. But no understanding occurs at all unless you have some foundation or basis of memorized information in your mind. Well, I want to go on to another strategy. I'm going to talk about creativity. You see, the more creative we can be, the better off. In fact, there's been a lot of research done in the area of memorization. Let me tell you what the single worst way to memorize is. And what's a shame is most of us were taught this is how it works. It's called rote memory. Do you know what rote memory is? Repetition, 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 it's like the Russian Revolution was in 1917. You know what you do? The Russian Revolution was in 1917, 1917, 1917. Does it look like I'm having any fun? Would it be any wonder if I woke up 15 minutes later with couch marks all over my face? Well, no, because it's not enjoyable. Rote memory is the single least way to be able to remember information. The best way, all the research has shown, is using different mnemonic techniques. Mnemonic means memory aid. It's a generic term, but visualization techniques. Now, let me give you an example. If you can be more bizarre with your visualization, do you think that would stick in your mind? Well, absolutely. It's like getting slapped in the face in the middle of a chemical formula. It just doesn't happen every day. Of course, neither does a hippopotamus flying through the air. But what I'm going to do right now is talk about how you can be a little bit more creative. Let's talk about a number of different things or strategies you might use. First is what's called the exchange method. Now let me explain what the exchange method is. That's when you take one item and it becomes the other item in real life. Let's go to the hippopotamus and the airplane. To use the exchange method, the hippopotamus becomes a real live airplane and it's flying through the sky. Or you might visualize a big jumbo 747 airplane out in the fields eating grass like a hippo. They exchange places in real life. Let's go to another strategy. This is called the dwarf giant method. The key to this strategy is to distort things to be larger or smaller than real life. If you were trying to remember airplane, now let's go with a football in a mountain. A football in a mountain. You could distort a football to be bigger than a real life-size mountain outside. Okay? Or you could distort the mountain to be smaller than a real-life football. Third strategy is what's called the whopper or exaggeration method. That's when you take thousands of one of the items you're trying to remember and stick it all over the other item. Here's an example. If you wanted to remember after earrings was envelope, you may take thousands of earrings and shove them into an envelope. If you wanted to remember candy cane and house, you could take thousands of candy canes and stick it all over a house. Now, another method is what's called the motion picture method. You see, I don't want you to be regimentized. Law students love this. Well, Monday I'm going to use the dwarf giant method. Tuesday, they're so regimented. It's any combination of these at any time. And what I suggest you do, any chance you get, is to use the motion picture method. That is when you see things flying, smashing, hitting, moving. A motion picture is going on in your mind. For instance, if you had to remember elephant and truck, you might visualize the elephant knocking over the truck, and the truck goes flying. In fact, that would take us on to number 5, which what I call using your senses. You see, the more senses you can bring into this process, the better off you'll be. Taste, touch, smell. When we were talking about the elephant in the truck, why not listen to the elephant hit the truck? Maybe the elephant stepped on your toe on the way to the truck and you felt the pain. The more you can get yourself involved, the better off you'll be. And finally, I want to just point out one last thing. You see, some of you are sitting out there going, well, Bob, I'm just too logical for this. I can't see an elephant flying over campus. I can't see some of these bizarre visualizations. I'm too logical. Well, if you're too logical, I want to tell you something right now. It's better to visualize something that seems logical than to not visualize at all. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose there were 2 things you had to do today. You've got to take the dog to the vet, and you've got to go buy a broom at the hardware store. Well, Mr. Logical might say, I'm going to visualize a broom and I'm hitting the dog. Is that logical? Oh, absolutely, and that would work. But what would be better, for those of you that want to be creative, in the corner is a broom barking at you. Or maybe you're sweeping up the floor with Mr. Poodle. Or maybe you're watching The Wizard of Oz and the wicked puppy of the West goes flying by the screen. All right, that's an example of going from logical to bizarre. Well, I want to talk about strategy number 2 now. You see, we talked about chain linking. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about paired linking. I call this the second strategy. You see, imagine yourself going to take a final exam. Could you imagine the professor walking in and saying, class, just take out a clean white sheet of paper? You'll notice, if you can remember, in the back of your textbook, 427 terms appear in the glossary. From memory, list as many as you can and tell me what they mean. Good luck. Oh, that would be a wonderful test, wouldn't it? And you see, most professors won't do that to us. Well, at least most of them won't. I had a professor, you never knew what he would do. But you see, now professors like to do something like this because it's easier. They want recognition tests, multiple choice. Do you have multiple choice tests here? Yeah, this piece of information goes with that piece of information. What's that? That's a pair. This date goes with this event. This vocabulary word goes with this definition. This foreign word goes with this English translation. All of those are what are called paired associates or paired links. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get to practice. I'm going to give you some paired links that I'm going to have you try to remember. I'm going to give you 4 seconds for each pair, and then at the end of this exercise, I'm going to test you and see how many of them you remember. But here's what we're going to do for the first 5. I want you to practice using the exchange method. Now let me review that for you. That's when one item becomes the other in real life. That's like our hippopotamus that became an airplane. So let's take the first one. I am going to give you 4 seconds to come up with a visualization, then I will throw one out for you. I want you to take the word train, and I want you to connect it to the word post, P-O-S-T. Don't write anything down. We'll test you in a minute. Visualize train and post using the exchange method. Go ahead. How many of you visualized a post going down the railroad tracks? Can I see your hands? Did you throw a little sound in there? Maybe some woo-woo? Yeah. Some of you, did you just say, well, the heck with the exchange method. I got a post in the middle of the tracks. Here comes the train, and it hit. Did anybody do that? Oh, yeah, that's a lot of fun, okay? Let's see if you can stick with the exchange method. Here's the next one. Dwarf, giant. No, we're not. Let's stay with the exchange method. Let's go to chair and swan. Chair and swan. How many of you right now are sitting on a poor defenseless swan? The rest of you, are your chairs floating around a pond going quack, quack, or whatever swans do? Fine. Let's go to the next one. I'm going to let you use whatever system you want on this one. Closet and pitchfork. Closet and pitchfork. How many of you are slamming pitchforks through that closet door? Others of you, you're opening the closet door and thousands of pitchforks fly out at you, right? Now, this is what's important. You've got to take either my visualization or yours and make sure you close your eyes and see it. If you don't take the second to see it in your mind's eye, you will lose it. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to trumpet and the flag you would find on a golf course. Trumpet and the flag on a golf course. Some of you right now, you're playing golf and asking somebody to pull the trumpet out of the cup for you, right? Others of you are in a parade and you're not playing trumpets, you're playing the flag on a golf course. Did somebody just say, well, I've got a flag sticking out of my trumpet? Good enough for me, all right? Here's our next one, radio and sickle. That's something you cut with. Radio and sickle. How many of you just sliced the radio in half? Does anybody got a boombox sickle on their shoulder? Here's the real test. Does anybody have a Sony Sickle Walkman on their head? Oh, we had one. That's great. All right, now let's go to the dwarf giant method. This is when things are larger or smaller than real life. I want you to take the word ring and connect it to the word golf club. Ring and golf club. Now you might visualize a giant golf club swing out of the sky, hit you right in the ring, and it hurts, okay? Here's our next one. Camera and hockey stick. Camera and hockey stick. You might be on the ice. You take a hockey stick and slap shot a giant Minolta camera. The Minolta slides across the ice and into the net. Here's our next one. Snowman and toothpaste. Snowman and toothpaste. How many of you had Frosty the toothpaste in your backyard? Oh, that's fun. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Let's go to popsicle and balloon. Popsicle and balloon. Some of you might visualize a giant popsicle floating off into the sky. Others of you might have the Goodyear popsicle floating across the sky. Here's our next one. Fish and baseball. Fish and baseball. Sometimes I wonder what you're thinking out there. Me, I had fish on first and third, another fish up to the bat. Did some of you splatter a fish out there just now? Yeah. Okay. Now for the next, I want you to go to the Whopper method. Now that's when you have thousands of items connected to something else. For instance, the first one's going to be pen, and I want you to connect it to a plateau or mesa, something flat. Pen and plateau. How many of you had thousands of pens on a plateau? Can I see your hands? I had a football player once say to me, "Hey, well, I got thousands of plateaus on a pen." I didn't really have anything to say after that. Penguin and McDonald's. Penguin and McDonald's. All right, thousands of little McPenguins waddling around McDonald's. Let's go to record and soda pop. Record and soda pop. Thousands of soda pops are flying off of your record player, okay? Let's go to the next one. Stay with me. We'll test you. Carpet and whale. Carpet and whale. Look down at the carpet. There's thousands of little whales flopping about. Our next one, plant and light bulb. Plant and light bulb. Think of your favorite plant. There's thousands of GE light bulbs all over it. Or maybe look up at the lights and you see thousands of plants coming down. Now, for the last 5, I'm going to give you 5 more. I want you to use the motion picture method. That's when you see things that are flying, smashing, hitting, moving. In fact, let's take football. What did we already say football was connected to? Mountain, but let's make it stronger. I want you all to visually pick up a football, throw it at the mountain, and you threw it so hard the football passes through the mountain. Here's our next one, and try to get yourself involved. Zebra and stairs. Zebra and stairs. Maybe you're riding a zebra down the stairs. Maybe you're walking up the stairs and thousands of zebras come down at you. Now you'll notice that I always throw out more than one example. You don't have to use all of them, just stick with one. Here's our next one. Keys and the wall. A set of keys and the wall. Did some of you throw your keys at the wall? Did some of you throw your keys through the wall? Did anybody have the walls come in and hit you in the keys? By the way, how many of you have trouble remembering where you put your keys? Can I see those hands? Okay, you know what you do? It's usually an attention problem. Here's what I suggest you do. Next time you walk into your apartment or your home, and if you put your keys on the television, visualize for just a moment the keys burning a hole through the TV. But I have one young lady, here's what she said to me. She said, well, if I put my keys on the TV, she said, here's what I do. I am now putting my keys on the TV. She said, now not only do I know where they are, but everybody in the house does too. All right, let's go to the next one. Hatchet and toes. Let's move on. Some are more memorable than others. Let's go to kitten and the moon. Kitten and the moon. Visualize a little kitten jumping over the moon. Now let me test you for just a moment here. I'm going to give you some words. I want you to tell me what goes with them. Are you ready? Train. What's connected to chair? Closet. Trumpet. Radio. Ring. Camera. Toothpaste. Popsicle. Fish. Pen. Penguin. Record. Carpet. Plant. Football. Zebra. Keys. Where did I put my keys? Thought you knew that. Hatchet. Did anybody forget that one? Kitten. How many of you got all 20 correct? Let me see your hands. That's fantastic. Now, staying with the paired link system, let me explain some strategies here. You see, applications deal with anytime you have what's called the multiple choice type test, a matching test, a fill-in-the-blank test. In fact, under that, you might talk about anytime you see things dealing with terms, definitions, vocabulary words, foreign languages, a date to an event, even a name to a face. And we'll show you how to remember names and faces a little bit later on. Well, let me talk about our next strategy. Our next strategy is what's called the resemblance peg system. You see, one of the keys to memorization is organization. A lot of people don't know that. Organization. Let me illustrate this. Everybody look up at me. I want you to think of the last time you were taking a test, there was 5 minutes left, and this is what's going through your mind. I know it. I know it. I can see it, it's right there at the top part of the page. I know it. When do you usually remember that information? Yeah, when it's too late, that's right, because you knew the information, but you didn't know where you filed it. It was misfiled. It's kind of like having a big filing cabinet, and you just tossed a piece of paper in there, and it takes hours to find out where it is. But if you put it in alphabetical order, can you find it quickly? Well, absolutely. In fact, let me illustrate this by another point. Everybody looking up at me, on the previous page, the first item I mentioned was a train. The second one I mentioned was a chair. But what was the 8th item mentioned? As soon as you know, raise your hand. What was the 8th item that I mentioned that I had you memorize? All right, tell me this. What was connected to snowman? Toothpaste. How many of you knew that? All of you did. You see, you knew the answer, but you didn't know you knew the answer. So what we're going to start now with are categorically or category techniques, ways to file away and retrieve information. The first one is called resemblance peg. We're going to start with 20 numbers, 20 items. You see, the problem with numbers is it's hard to visualize a number. They're so abstract. So we're going to come up with a way that we can turn a number into something concrete. Let me give you an example. Let's take the number 1. The number 1 resembles or looks just like a post. So now, from now on, when somebody says number 1 is you see a post. I don't want you to see number 1 anymore. In fact, number two resembles or looks just like a swan. Can you see how if you draw out the number 2, it looks just like a swan? All right. Number 3, if you draw out number 3, it looks just like a pitchfork. From now on, pitchfork will be number 3. Let's go through a few of these. Number 4 resembles the flag you would find on a golf course. By the way, what was connected to flag? Trumpet. Isn't that interesting? And you remembered that. Number 5 resembles a sickle, something that you cut with. Number 6 resembles a golf club. Number 7 resembles a hockey stick upside down. You know what else I like about this system? I teach elementary children these techniques, and it's so amazing how fast they will remember the information. By the way, what does number 5 look like? What's 3 look like? What's number 1 look like? Yeah, see, it's something that you can learn quickly and start utilizing. Let's go on. Number 8 resembles a snowman. So from now on, 8 will be snowman. Number 9 resembles a balloon on a string or a balloon on a stick. Number 10, if you draw number 10 out, it looks like a ball and a bat. So number 10 will always be baseball. Now let me give you another application here. Let's suppose you had to remember the first president of the United States was Washington. You take a post and you stick it through the wash. You see, you can now identify who was the 4th president, who was the 7th president, instead of having to chain link through all of the different information. Well, let's go on. Number 11 resembles soldiers. So from now on, 11 will be soldiers. 12 resembles a snail. Now this is flexible. If you look up there and go, I'll never remember that 12 looks like a snail, all you'd have to do is decide this. From now on, in my mind, 12 is going to be something else. 12 reminds you of a dozen. A dozen what? Yeah, some of you say eggs, some of you say donuts, some of you say dates, whatever it is that you think of. But stick with that. You might visualize a dozen eggs visually connected to whatever number 12 is. Number 13 resembles Jaws. The shark, okay? You can just have him chomp down on whatever the 13th thing is you're trying to remember. 14, resembles a field goal post. Now, whatever it is, the 14th thing you got to do today, or your 14th goal, visualize it going through the goalpost, or you're kicking it through the goalpost. Number 15, resembles a boot. I shove down into the boot whatever 15 is. Number 16, 16 could be visually a trumpet. Some people say funnel, but it's up to you. 16 is a trumpet. 17 is a cliff. Chuck it off the cliff. Whatever 17 is, have a lot of fun with this. Chuck it off the cliff. Now, 18 is a lot of fun. 18 resembles a double-barrel shotgun. No further explanation is necessary. 19 resembles a smokestack. I want you to visualize shoving something down the smokestack, whatever your number 19 is going to be. Number 20 resembles a pair of glasses or a pair of goggles. Now, you see, we've just given you a basis to start from 1 to 20, but you see, you can carry it further. Maybe you want to remember more than 20 bits of information. Here's a suggestion I have for you. Just start drawing out numbers. If you take the number 21, that could become an iron in your mind. Iron, I-R-O-N. 22, if you look at that, it could be a toboggan coming down off of a hill. Actually, it's going the other way, but I never did well in art. But you could continue that way. But you know what else you could do? 57. What's the first thing you think about with 57? Heinz 57 sauce. For some of the guys, you give a number, you might think of a particular football player or baseball player. 45 Colt, 65 retirement. Go through and assign a picture to each one of those numbers. Now, practical application dealing with this technique. Let's go back to rote memory. Let's go back to our example. The Russian Revolution was in 1917, 1917, 1917. Why not just do this? Visualize, close your eyes. Visualize a Russian picking up a large smokestack. For what number? And now he chucks it off a cliff. For what number? Open your eyes. How many times do you have to go over that to get it right on a multiple choice test next week? Oh, not many times, isn't that right? In fact, let me give you another practical application. You see, how many of you came here today because you want to improve your lives for the better? Let me see those hands. Okay, that's where I've always been in my life. And you know what? And I always go back to this card file of quotes that I had. I've always thought, if I could put those quotes in my mind, what a better life I would have. And let me give you an example. You see, my greatest treasure in my life, let me show you what that is. It's my two little boys. That's Thomas and Bobby. Can you imagine how good looking their mom must be looking at them? Yeah, comparing them. But you see, when I pick up one of my little boys, what I've done is I've memorized over 200 quotes. I can pick up one of my little boys and instantly information pops into my mind, like quote 130. Children are like wet cement. Whatever falls on them leaves an impression. How about quote 133? Children are not things to be molded, but people to be unfolded. How about quote 121? A father who gives his children habits of industry and education provides for them better than giving them a fortune. That's the information that's going to change your lives for the better. But does it do any good if it's on your bookshelf or in a computer terminal? No, it doesn't. It's only if it's up here. That's another way you could use these numbers to file away and retrieve information. Now, some of you like to go to parties. Some of you like to get in social gatherings where you're meeting people. Who's usually the life of the party? The person who can remember all the funny stories, right? And you keep going, yeah, I heard that one. I just couldn't think of it as fast as he did. Why not do this? I didn't do this when I go to movies. They tell all these funny jokes or little humorous things happen. I will connect a post to a key word in the first humorous story or anecdote or quote or whatever it might be. I have a swan connected to the second one, a pitchfork connected to the third one. You could become the life of the party for 20 jokes. Then you're on your own, okay? So anyway, those are a couple of ways you might use the resemblance peg system for filing away and retrieving information. So now I want to talk about another strategy, another filing strategy. And this filing strategy deals with locations. In fact, it is called the loci method. I mean, it goes back for hundreds of years. And you see in the loci, let me give you an example. You see, I want to tell you about the first time I ever started using these techniques. I had a professor when I was going to college, and he started off his first lecture just like this. Class, it's going to be tough this next semester with me. Just want you to know, nobody has ever scored 100% on one of my 50-question multiple choice tests. Don't you love professors like that? I wanted to raise my hand and say, well, sir, obviously you don't know how to teach. You might consider another line of work. But I was smart. I kept my mouth shut. I got together with a football player, another football player on the team, a gal who was on the gymnastic team, and the three of us studied together. In fact, I suggest that. Don't study alone. My gosh, what could be more boring? Get together with one or two other people using these techniques. It's a lot more fun to memorize this way than the way you're doing right now. Absolutely. Get a pizza, make a party out of it, and you'll actually remember too. Well, I went through the first 4 chapters using the techniques. I went into a testing center to take that test. Now, that's a place where they have a computer clock you in and clock you out. They know how long it took everybody to take the test. Well, in 27 minutes, I walked out with the first 100% ever in this gentleman's class. I tell you this story because I got a 0 for cheating. Yeah, I did. In fact, he called me into his office. He said, "I can't believe you're insulting my intelligence like this, pal." I said, "Why? What did I do?" He said, "Do you know how long it took everybody else to take that test?" I said, "No." He said, "Somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half." And he says, "I happen to know what your background is. There's no way you could do what you just did. I don't know how you did it, but you're getting a 0. So I said, well, sir, could you just ask me something from one of the first 4 chapters? He goes, "Okay, smarty pants." He grabs the book. By the way, he wrote it. And he starts flicking through the pages. He goes, "Okay, what are the 12 attributes of a grapevine in communication?" Well, I just happened to remember that was on page 56. I don't usually know that, but I thought, well, let's throw it in. That's on page 56. In fact, I used a clump of grapes, and I chain linked 12 items under it, and I told him the information in order as it appeared in the book. Now, I don't know how many opportunities you get to throw darts back at your professor, but that was mine. But the reason I tell you this story is the 2 people that were in my study group got the 2nd and 3rd highest grade, a 94 and a 92. Now, this was graded on a curve. Granted, we didn't make a lot of friends that first test. But we did have a lot of volunteers who wanted to join us for our next study group. Okay, but anyway, getting back to the loci system, you see, how many of you will take a test and then systematically forget everything? It comes time for finals, and you find that you're memorizing everything from scratch all over again. Is that time-consuming? Are there better things to do at the end of the semester? Absolutely. Well, getting my master's degree, I had to take a comprehensive final, not that covered my last semester, but covered my last year and a half of coursework. Now, that's a lot of information. Give you an example. Most of my classmates, most of my peers were taking somewhere between 4 to 6 months to get ready for that final exam. I got ready in 3 weeks. I was able to review in 3 weeks what took them months. And I'll tell you right now, they were smarter than me. I mean, I was somebody who struggled with a 3.0 GPA if I lived 30 hours a week in the library. I mean, it was quite an achievement to jump up to 3.8. My mother didn't believe me. I had to send her my transcripts to prove it. And I sent them because I wanted more money, okay? So the loci system is so powerful because I used virtually hundreds of loci to get ready for that comprehensive final. Let me begin. In the loci system, the first step is to pick a location that is concrete in your mind's eye. Let me walk you through one. Everyone close your eyes. I want you to start walking down the driveway of your home where you grew up. I want you to walk into the garage. You see, because if you don't have a garage, build one for this exercise, please. You see, because the second step is to take a logical walk in sequential order around that home. So let's say we started with the driveway. Then we go into the garage. Now I want you to walk into your kitchen. Now I want you to walk into your living room. Now walk into your bedroom. In fact, let's look for detail. Look at your bed. Is it made? No, I didn't think so. Now, walk into your bathroom. Now go upstairs. If you have a Rambler, go into the crawl space. Please, cooperate. Now I want you to go up onto the roof, and then I want you to look at the chimney, and then I want you to look at the tree that's growing next door. Let's stop there. You see, we've just taken a walk, and you know what? You can remember that concretely because where was the first area I had you start walking down? The driveway. And then you walked into the, and then you walked into the, and then into the, and then into the, and then into the, next, 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 next. Okay, we went through it and you remember it. See, that's not the problem. So you know what the next thing you got to do? You take the information you're trying to remember and you visually link it to each one of those locations. Well, let's suppose you're going shopping today and you want to remember to pick up some things from the store. Close your eyes. The first thing I want you to pick up is hairspray. So I want you to start walking down that driveway and there's this large can of hairspray shooting everything in sight. Now walk into your garage. I want you to pick up salt and pepper, so I want you to see thousands of salt and pepper shakers, salt and peppering everything to death. Now walk into your kitchen. I want you to see a ton of spaghetti on that kitchen table. Now I want you to walk into your living room. You want to pick up some pears? Hey, there's pears all over your living room floor. In fact, you're barefoot squishing through the carpet. Mom's trying to vacuum up the pears with a Hoover. Now I want you to walk into your bedroom, and I want you to pick up some liver. So when you walk into your bedroom, I want you to smell liver. Take in a deep breath. You smell liver. Yeah, there's liver on your bed, liver in your drawers. Now I want you to walk into the bathroom, and you need to pick up some Comet Cleanser. I want you to see a ton of the green stuff cover your entire body. Okay, open your eyes. When it comes time to remember the information that you wanted to recall, simply take a walk. What's in your driveway? What's in your garage? What's in your kitchen? What's in your living room? What's in your bedroom? What's in your bathroom? What's upstairs? Nothing. Isn't it nice to know there's nothing? How many times have you ever taken an essay test and you're thinking to yourself, is there more? Oh my gosh, is there more? Isn't it nice to know there is nothing else? In fact, you see, what we're talking about is the location system. And I just talked about 10 bits of information. But let's talk about remembering 100 bits of information. You see, our first area was what again? The driveway, okay? Let's suppose I wanted you to remember 10 things connected to the driveway. How would you do it? Could you use the chain link system? We know how to link 10 things to one item, don't we? Well, why not chain link 10 bits of information to the driveway? Why not link 10 bits of information to the garage? Link 10 bits of information to your kitchen. You know, if you have 10 locations and you link 10 to each one, how many bits of information did you just memorize? 100. Oh, that's the way you could do it. In fact, let's suppose you had to give a speech in this room. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose that you were going to give a speech dealing with biology. The first step is to what? Identify your location. Well, long as you're going to give the speech here, can't we use this room? Yeah, you're familiar with it now. Now, please note, use a place that you're familiar with. I had a football player once said, I'm going to use the Taj Mahal. I said, have you ever seen the Taj Mahal? He says, well, no. Yeah, you want to use something you concretely can visualize already. So we're going to identify some locations in here. And since you're going to be standing here at the podium, let's make this location number 1. Let's make that stage location number 2, that chalkboard location number 3, the light location number 4, and we identify 10 bits around this room to connect information to. You all with me? So now, if the first thing you're going to talk about in biology is the hypothalamus, well, maybe you see a big fat hippo bouncing up and down on the podium in your mind's eye. The second thing you're going to talk about are genes in biology. So you see a bunch of 501 genes, just the genes, dancing on stage. The third thing you want to remember is the diencephalon of the brain. Well, you see your friend Diane, and she's trying to crawl her way up. Well, if there's any Dianes here, I am sorry. But you see Diane right there on the chalkboard. You see, when you go to give that speech, instead of looking at your notes, instead of killing yourself, you just look at the podium and you go, in the first place, you're talking about what? The hypothalamus. In the second place is the? In the third place is the? Yeah, but you know what? We go back to that. Well, you can't just say hypothalamus. You've got to tell them 2 or 3 things about it. Well, connect 2 or 3 things to the hippopotamus, 2 or 3 things to the genes, 2 or 3 things to Diane. In fact, let me tell you a way that's even a little bit more easy than that. You see, if we go back to driveway, you see, you've got to remember, in the driveway, you usually have something concrete like a mailbox at the front of it, or the back of it, or wherever. And that's also where you park your car. Once again, this is the front of the car. I'll put the headlight on it, okay? Why not do this? Instead of chain linking 10 bits of information to the asphalt of the driveway, why not link just 3 bits of information to the driveway, link 3 bits of information to the mailbox, and link 3 bits of information to the hood of the car, and stick another bit of information in the trunk of the car? Could you do that? Well, absolutely, because I've done it. In fact, let's just go to your kitchen. I passed a test having over 70 bits of information in my kitchen. Let me walk you through it. You see, when you walk up to your kitchen door, well, is that concrete? Well, connect something to it. Then you reach for the doorknob. Is that concrete? Yeah, connect something to that too. Then I walk in and there's the cupboard door. Well, I connect something to the cupboard door, but when I open the cupboard, there's some plates and some glasses. I connect information to each one of those. Then I open the silverware drawer. I connect a bit of information to a fork, to a spoon, to a spatula. Then I go over to the oven and I connect, or the stove, and I boil, broil, and bake 3 bits of information. That's all I know about cooking. I had to move on. I went on to the refrigerator. Now, as you can tell from me, I'm very intimate with the refrigerator and the contents thereof. And I connected all kinds of information to my favorite snacks. I passed a test visually connecting information in one room in my home. You see, let's talk about all the different locations you can use, because if you have a test in biology, and you have a test in chemistry coming up the same week or even the same semester, do you want to use the same location twice? No, you know what you're going to have? I don't care what they say. You will have interference. You'll go, well, God, is that a chemical formula or is that the hypothalamus? And you'll just get confused. You don't have to use the same location twice because I am going to show you how there's thousands of locations to choose from. Let's start with buildings. Let's start with your home. You could use your own home, your best friend's home, your relative's home. But let's get away from houses. Now let's go up to the buildings. You could use your elementary school, your high school. Are you still familiar with those? If you are, use them. If you can't remember what they look like, don't use them. How about where you work? I had one guy who could connect all kinds of information to a grocery store. He worked there for 5 years. He said, I could walk down. He says, I can tell you where everything is on every single aisle. I could connect things to the canned vegetables, to the dog food, because he knew exactly where. See, you take something that's concrete. But let's get away from buildings. Anything. Write that down. That's important. Anything can be a location. Anything. Let's just go to a car. My heavens, do you know how much information you could connect to one single car? How many parts are on a car? Yeah, most of us don't know more than about 10 or 15, but if you were a mechanic, you'd know a lot more, wouldn't you? But let's just start with a hubcap. We're all familiar with that. Connect a bit of information to the hubcap. Connect another bit of information to the tire, to the bumper, to the grill, to the hood. If you don't know anything about the engine, move on. I don't, I move on. I go to the windshield wipers, the steering wheel, the radio, your date. Now save something good for that one, okay? Then there's the trunk. No, don't throw your date in the trunk. But there's the trunk. And what if you had more information you needed to connect, but you ran out of place on your car? What do? Tow something. What could you tow? Is there any limit to what you could tow? Could you tow a battleship? Could you tow a cruiser? Yeah, you could tow whatever it is you want. And you connect more information to that. In fact, let's just take a chair. How many parts of a chair are there? There's the top of the chair, the back of the chair, the seat of the chair, the arm of the chair, the leg of the chair. There's the floor that the chair is sitting on. Anything can be a location. I got to tell you about one individual. He wanted to play it safe. He had just learned the techniques. He said, I was going in to take a test, and God, I had about 60, 70 bits of information I had to remember. It was econ, economics. And he said, I decided, because it was an essay-type test, he was going to use his pen. His pen. He had a big pen, one of those big clicks. He connected 5 or 6 bits of information to the little clicker, 5 or 6 little bits of information to the ballpoint. Then he started to take it apart. He unscrewed it to the plate, the little shaft, to the spring, to the ink. He passed the test. In fact, he aced the test by sitting there looking at his pen. Anything can be a location, absolutely anything. Okay, let me give you another example. Now, using the location method, is anybody in here taking anatomy, physiology? Can I see your hands? Well, you know another location you can use? Your own body, can't you? In fact, I use this for emergency procedures. Before we go to anatomy, let me give you an example. One time I was going to take a final exam, and I ran into one of my buddies, and he said, hey, did you remember to go over the stuff in chapter 4? And he was pretty specific, and I said, no, when did he ever say that was going to be on the test? He said that day you went skiing, he told us it was going to be on the test. I said, well, thanks for telling me. Well, on the way to the test, I memorized the information because I connected it to my own body. I went in order. I started with my head, connected a bit of information there to my forehead, to my nose, to my eye, went right down my body. Now, I use that for emergency procedures only because you can only use your body so many times. But some of you one day will interview for a job. Hey, don't go in with all those notes. I mean, some people say you can, some people say you shouldn't. Well, why not have all of your questions pre-registered right on your own body? Or if you're working for somebody. You know, one time I was sitting in a boardroom, and the president of the company was going over all of these points, and everybody's scribbling, and I'm just sitting there, just like that. And he finally got a little upset with me. He says, don't you think you ought to take some notes and try to remember this stuff? I said, I've got it. He said, well, why don't you go ahead and review everything for everyone? And I did, because I was connecting it to him. I was having so much fun with it, too. I was trying not to chuckle. But what kind of an impression did I just make with him? You know, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. Most of you, after you graduate, you know, I was under this misconception. God, after I graduate, oh, God, then I can stop studying. You know what? That's just when it begins. My brother started for what was then one of the big 8 accounting firms. Guess what happened on day 1? Handed him a manual about this thick. He learned it faster than any of his peers. Who made the first big impression? That wasn't that tough of a question. Yeah, my brother did. But you see, I'll help answer some of these questions for you as we go along, okay? All right, let's go back to anatomy or physiology. The muscles are on you. Let's start with facial muscles. You see right here, it's called the frontalis. It's a muscle that covers your forehead. Why not visualize the front end of a car hit you right in the forehead? In fact, this is the zygomaticus. I do this for a lot of medical students. And they usually already know all the muscles, but they were having some fun with it because they were going to go on for origins, insertions, and things of that nature. But one of them said zygote. I think of an egg. You know, egg, zygote. So he says, I'm going to take 2 eggs and go like this. He said, by the way, did you know the zygomaticus makes you smile? So I'm going to do this. But he could remember it. This is the platysma. Visualize a little platypus who's stuck right there on your neck. In fact, on the back of your leg is the gastrocnemius. Visualize a gas truck running up and down the back of your leg. Hey, but then you know what people say to me? Oh, my gosh. When I take the test and I look at my calf, aren't I going to remember gas truck and forget gastrocnemius? That is a good question, but the answer is no. You see, when you all walk through that door today, your natural memory didn't turn off while these techniques are in play. They're working together, and that's what makes it so powerful. In fact, now that we have you actually paying attention to what it is you're trying to remember, you would be surprised how much your natural memory picks up. Let me illustrate. Number 7 in the resemblance peg system. What is the picture that goes with the number 7 from memory? A hockey stick. What did you slap shot? A camera. What kind of camera was it? I didn't tell you to visualize a Minolta. In fact, most of you don't know the difference between a Minolta and an Olympus. But that was your natural memory working in conjunction with these techniques, and that's where the power of it is. In fact, I'll tell you something. On all those quotes, I don't have to see thousands of pictures anymore. The pictures have disappeared, and the information stays. But if I do get confused, if I can't remember, then I go back to the visualization, and it cues me right back. Well, I want to talk about memorizing theories. Did you know you can memorize theories using the loci system? Let me give you an example. I had a professor who said, you are responsible, and he gave us a list of 60 theorists. He said, I want you to know what theory each one of these gentlemen developed, what year they were developed, and 2 or 3 concepts concerning each one of those theories. Well, that's an essay-type test situation. In fact, we knew he was going to give us that type of test. So we've got to decide, how are we going to file away and retrieve that information? Well, here's what I do with theories. You see, if I have a theory, I want to go back to the loci system. I want to pick a location for the theory. Let me give you an example. Let's take cognitive dissonance. Oh, I heard that. Somebody's taking that right now. Okay, cognitive dissonance. Now, here's how you decide what location to use with cognitive dissonance. You see, you look at the word cognitive, and you will pick the location out of that word. Well, the first thing that came to my mind was a cog, like a cogwheel. Well, the problem with a cogwheel, or just a wheel, is do you want to connect a whole bunch of information to a round wheel? No, that's not a good idea. So let's expand. Let's make it a wagon like you would see in a wagon train, complete with our driver. And in fact, let's even have a horse. It's my drawing. I can do whatever I want. I was told you can think whatever you want in the privacy of your own mind. But now that I have my location, I've got to decide what is the sequence. Well, I'm going to decide. My horse is going to be location number 1. My driver will be location number 2. The top of the wagon will be location number 3. The back of the wagon will be location number 4. If I have additional information to remember, I will go to the wagon wheel. I will go to the spokes of the wheel. And what could I do if I run out? Run it over. The 7th item will get run over by the wagon. The 8th item will be on the Indian who is attacking the wagon. You see how you can just keep going? Let's go to the theory of cognitive dissonance, developed by Festinger. How can you visualize Festinger? A big bumblebee comes flying down and stings location number 1, which is the horse. Now let's suppose the theory was developed in 1817. That driver is carrying the biggest shotgun you ever saw. For what number? And he blows away a cliff. For what number? Okay, now this deals with attitudes and behaviors. And we're going to talk more about how to file information visually. But for attitude, well, my 2-year-old just seems to cry all the time. I just thought, well, I guess his attitude isn't the best right now. So I visualize my 2-year-old on top of the wagon. And he's not very happy. And for behavior, well, I visualize a Doberman. The dog, a Doberman, because I'm hoping the Doberman will behave himself. But now here's the beauty of it. When he puts on his essay test, theory of cognitive dissonance, I automatically come up with that picture. I see the horse, and I go, oh, Festinger. I see the driver, I go 1817. I see my baby on top of the wagon, for what? And I see the Doberman inside, for what? And what's connected to the back of the wagon? Nothing. I'm finished. I can move on. Do you see how that works? In fact, let's suppose you had an anatomy professor tell you that he was going to give you an essay-type test that dealt with a part of the body. He said, I'm not going to tell you what part of the body. You're responsible to know all of them. You need to know what are all the functions of that body, part of the body. In fact, here's what I did. Let's use this campus. Each building will become a center for all of the information concerning one body part. Now, how do you find it? Well, it's just like a computer. You need to access where the brain is. You know how you do that? You close your eyes and you visualize a brain. Well, you already have done this. You visualized a big gray matter brain on top of the library. You go, aha, everything I know about the library, everything I know about the brain is in the library. So you walk up to let me walk you through it. You walk up to the doors of the library. Oh, there's that big fat hippo. He's in the way. What's that for? Hypothalamus. But now, once again, there's 4 things that you need to talk about the hypothalamus. Well, can't that hippo become a location in and of himself? Absolutely. His nose could be location number 1, his ear location number 2, the back number 3, its tail number 4. In fact, this hippo right now is thumping me on the back of my brain, right there at the lower. Guess where the hypothalamus is located? At the base of your brain. But now I'm finished with the hypothalamus. I go on. I go up to the circulation desk, and there's thousands of brooms for the cerebrum. There's thousands of bells going up the stairs for the cerebellum. Hey, there's Diane at the top waving for the diencephalon. Well, let's talk about memorizing word for word. Listen to this. As you become cognizant of an amorousness via your paramour, that innumerable autonomous entities endeavor internally to procure, I'll imply no supplemental happenstance or affluence as through corporeal perspicacity, innovation, tenacity, coupled with the benefaction of confidence and progeny, its realization is imminent. Ergo set forth, aggrandizing rapture, ascertaining an acumen to articulate ardor, sans circumscription, and inexhaustible profundities, be cogitative, devoid of prevarication, and demonstrative of all magnanimity, as it is these attributes, no, not opulence or kismet, that are the infrastructure of the aggregate compilation of ensuing exuberance. You see, people were asking me, well, how complicated could the material be that you can memorize using these techniques? Doesn't get much tougher than that, does it? By the way, my brother gave that at his best friend's wedding as a toast. How would you like to receive that as a toast at your wedding? Now, that's how they reacted. Anyway, I wanted to memorize it. Now, it didn't take that long. Now, I could have used rote memory. I could have repeated it over and over. And some of you are thinking to yourself, isn't it quicker just to repeat it 45 times instead of go through all of the pictures? All of the research indicates, no, that is not the case. It is quicker to use visualizations because you only have to go through it once or twice instead of repeating it 45, 50 times to get the information. Let me show you what I did. I picked a location. On this one, I used my own body. As you become. Right there on my head were the first 3 words, as you become. Now, I usually don't memorize little words like that, but how many of you, if you hear the first 3 or 4 words of a sentence, of a poem, of a song, all of a sudden you can remember the whole line, right? So I thought this would help key me in. So I see a little as on my head, or an ass, a donkey. On the donkey are a bunch of sheep, or ewes. And on the sheep are a bunch of bumblebees. As you become cognizant, there's that cogwheel again, as you become cognizant of an amorousness. Now I see a bunch of armor on my nose and a pear in my mouth. As you become cognizant of an amorousness via your paramour. Now notice I am not, after those first 3 words, I don't come up with a little visualization for every if, and but. You know why? Because you go nuts. You'll find that if you repeat a sentence 1 or 2 times, the ifs, ands, and buts will fall into place. Okay? Well, let me talk about one other thing dealing with location. The chunking method using the location. Let's suppose you have something dealing with categories. Now, this is really important. I would write that word down, category. Because, see, many things you do in your schoolwork deal with categories. For instance, let's suppose you have a professor who lists 45 theorists on the board and says, you need to know if they came from the Baroque period, the Renaissance period, or the Expressionism period. Here's what you do with each category. You come up with a location. Let's say with Baroque. What's a visualization for Baroque? A bar, okay? You can visualize a bar. For Expressionism, you might visualize an express train. It might be a bunch of a locomotive with all of the trains in a caboose on a track. Renaissance, well, you got to remember it was around Christmas time. I pictured Santa and his reindeer. But the point is, I can dump every one of these artists or theorists or whatever into that particular location. For instance, let's suppose Van Gogh. What could you visualize for Van Gogh, by the way? Yeah, a van going. You could visually see a van going across the bar. Monet, what can you visualize for Monet? Money. You could see a ton of money all over the train. You see, when it comes to that particular artist, you say Van Gogh, he can only be in one of those 3 locations and that's it. Instead of taking each one of those artists and repeating it 45 times, just visually dump them into one of the locations. One other example like that is, how many of you have ever taken a foreign language and you got to remember, is it masculine or is it feminine? Do you ever have to do that? Well, why not do this? Those are 2 categories. Let's take masculine. Everybody, let's go to California, visually. I know, kind of a pleasant thought. And I want you to put one foot in the Atlantic, or Pacific, I'm sorry, I forgot. One foot in the Pacific, yeah. See, I can't forget anything. What did you have for dinner 4 weeks ago? I'll get nailed for it. All right, I want you to put one foot in the Pacific Ocean and one foot on the beach. One foot is wet, one foot is dry. Everything that happens out in the ocean will be the category of masculine. Everything that happens on the dry ground will be the category of feminine. Example, in the French language, gâteau is masculine, or cake, it is masculine. Visually take a cake and throw it in the water and see it splash. You could take thousands of words or thousands of items and throw them into the water. When that moment comes, is it masculine or feminine? All you've got to identify, is it all wet or isn't it? Ice cream is feminine. Take an ice cream cone and put that up on the beach. So, oh, by the way, I got in trouble with this one. You know, I said ice cream is feminine. I was doing this lecture for Northern Arizona State University, and I said ice cream is feminine, and this entire football team just bust out laughing. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. You know, and after 45 seconds of people that are bigger than you laughing at you, you kind of start to wonder. So I asked somebody on the front row, I said, ice cream is feminine. What's so funny? He says, well, you see that big old tackle in the back? His nickname's Ice Cream. You're dead. Okay. Anytime you deal with categories, use the loci system and take each one of the locations and turn it into a visualization. Now, go ahead and close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. And I want you to walk up to the mailbox, back where you grew up. And in the mailbox, I want you to shove a large ham. Now I want you to take a pitchfork and shove it through the ham. Now start walking down the driveway, and in the driveway is Winnie the Pooh, and he's clinging to a flag. Now I want you to visualize going to the end of your driveway, and there's your car, and your car's sinking in water. You're a bit perturbed. Jump out of your car and throw a spear at the garage. The garage retaliates and throws a spear back at you. So walk up to the garage. You can't help but notice that the garage door is covered with hair. Try to clean it off with a pitchfork. You open the garage door. Thousands of oranges come out at you. Go to the back of the garage, there's another door. Throw a ham through it. And as the door starts swinging to shut again, it almost swings shut on a swan's neck. Swan's okay. Now go behind your garage, and there's where your lawnmower is. On your lawnmower is Winnie the Pooh, still clinging to his flag. Now, how many of you have ever taken chemistry? Can I see your hands? A lot of you have. What if you had a chemistry test at the end of the week, and the chemistry professor said, I want you to memorize all these chemical formulas? Well, I just had you memorize when phosphoric acid mixes with water. It changes in 3 stages. You just memorized the first stage. Let me illustrate. You walked up to your mailbox. What was in it? Ham. There's an H. What did you stick through the ham? What number is that? 3. H3. Now, who's laying in the driveway? Winnie the Pooh. There's our P.O., and he's clinging to what? Which is number 4. Now, you get to the end of the driveway. There's your car. What's your car doing? What is water? H2O. By the way, if you know that water is H2O, visualize the water. You don't have to see a ham driving the car, swans in the back seat, and onions in the trunk. That takes too long. Just see the water. All right, at this point, what did you throw at the garage? A spear. What did the garage throw back at you? Do you recognize that symbol? Yeah, you see every symbol, I don't care if it's chemistry, calculus, math, science, every one of those symbols can become a visualization. A plus sign, what could that be? A cross, what could a minus sign be? It could be a plate, okay? What could be a square root? A tree. A tree has roots. That could become your square root visualization. Well, let's go on. You walk up to the garage door. It's covered with what? Hair. So you try to clean it off with a pitchfork. But you open the garage door, out came oranges. So you walk to the back of the garage. What did you throw through the door? Ham. What almost got caught in the door? Our number 2. And who's in the back of the garage? Winnie the Pooh, still clinging to his flag. There's the first stage. Put the second stage in your kitchen, the third stage in your living room. Now, granted, you may not understand what that means yet, but you get to pass 2 or 3 tests until the understanding comes later. So you're covered both ways. I think that's important. Okay. Now, let's talk about substitute words. I want everybody to start thinking about strategies of how to take words or ideas and turn them into a visualization. Here's the first strategy I would suggest. Ask yourself this question. Can I visualize the item just as it sits? Let's take the word Ashburn. How can you visualize Ashburn? Ash is burning, okay? Let's suppose Ashburn invented the overhead projector. He didn't, but let's just pretend he did. What could you visualize? Thousands of ashes burning the projector to the ground. Maybe ashtrays all over the projector. Let's take the state of Maine. What could you visualize for Maine? A horse's mane. What else could you visualize? A lion's mane. What else? Main Street. Now, somebody said the state of Maine. Now, here's the problem with that. Let's suppose you're doing something where you have to remember something that's connected to every one of the states. Well, Maine's going to be easy. It's up here. Florida will be easy. California and Texas. How do you connect anything to Colorado? How do you differentiate that from Nebraska or Wyoming? Or, you see, it starts to cause interference. So take something that's concrete. Maine. Don't visualize the mane on a map. Visualize a horse's mane. Now, here's what's interesting. Let's suppose there were 5 bits of information you had to connect to the state of Maine. You know what strategy you could use? You could either chain link 5 bits of information to that horse, or couldn't that horse become a location? We're back to our loci method. 1 bit of information is connected to his nose, to the bridle, to his saddle, to the rider, etc. Well, here's another strategy. Ask yourself this. If the first one doesn't work, say, what does that item sound like? Bruce sounds like what? Spruce, or moose, or goose, or juice. Not, word of caution. If the first thing you thought of was moose, go with it. You know why? Because when you take a test 2 weeks from now, the first thing you're going to think of is, guess what? Moose. So if you sat there and go, okay, Bruce reminds me of moose. Well, there's goose and juice, and I'll go with juice. Okay, there's this orange juice. When you go to take the test, guess what happened? You go Bruce. Oh, that's connected to moose. Moose. Don't see anything on the moose. Problem here. Yeah, so go with whatever you think of first, all right? Minnesota. How can you visualize a Minnesota? A mini soda. Yeah, that's right. And you can connect information to the froth of the soda, to the glass, to the handle underneath. Well, let's go to a third strategy. You got to ask yourself, can I visualize it being a little bit more creative, or by breaking it up? Here's an example. Hendrix. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Jimi. That's right. How can you make a location out of Jimi Hendrix? His guitar. Absolutely. Now, some people chuckle, but hey, you know how many accoutrements are on a guitar? You can connect all kinds of information, but write this down. Here's your third strategy. Break it up. Break it up. Let's take the word Hendrix. H-E-N-D-E-R. Let's just go with Hendrix. If you broke that word up, what words do you see in the word Hendrix? A hen, absolutely. What's another one? Derricks. There's Ricks. In fact, all football players, almost unconditionally, they see this first. Hey, it's obvious. Look, there's the tight end. It's right there in the middle. It was obvious to them. You see, we're all operating from our own world of experience. All right, so break it up. Let's take Iowa. How can you visualize Iowa? Yeah, your I, or an IOU. How would you visualize an IOU? It could be money or a note. Colorado State, one of the football players. My best stories come with football players. One of the guys jumps up and goes, I visualize Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And we all just looked at him. He goes, you know, I-O, I-O. And you should have saw his coach after that one, yeah. Let's take the word cuboidal. Now, most of you have not probably heard of cuboidal before, but that's pretty unfamiliar. Cuboidal, how can you turn that into a visualization? A cube, or cube of butter, or cute boy. You see, here's a word that most of you are not familiar with, and yet you can think of 2 or 3 visualizations that will go with it. Another strategy, by the way, is rhyming. Now, I don't like to always depend on rhyming. That's why I go through some of the other strategies first. But New York rhymes with what? Yeah, all kinds of things, all right? Dave rhymes with grave or wave or slave. In fact, one other strategy is, does the word remind you of something you can visualize? Well, Arizona, what does it remind you of? Yeah, see, that's an example of something that reminds you of something. How about hypothalamus? So it already reminds you of what? Or it could be a hypodermic needle, whatever you want to use. Now, I'm going to throw out some information. I'm going to have you actually memorize this now. So I want you to go ahead and put your pens, your papers down, and I'm going to give you some examples. By the way, how many of you know French? How about Italian? Greek? Japanese? English? Okay, just wanted to check it. By the way, when I was at Berkeley, I had one guy in the front row. I swear he went like this, and he raised his hand the entire time. I said, do you know all those languages? What are you doing here? Okay. Let's start with this one. Bellicose. Everybody say bellicose. Bellicose means somebody who is given to fighting. Somebody who likes to get in fights. Well, what can you visualize for bellicose? Yeah, a bell. Okay, no, we're taking the word bellicose. You visualize a bell. Now, given to fighting, what could you visualize for that? Yeah, Mike Tyson or somebody who's in a fight. So visualize Mike Tyson, he's going bam, bam, and he just keeps hitting that bell. So now every time you see bellicose, you go, somebody who's given to fighting. Let me give you another one, prosy. What does prosy rhyme with? Yeah, rosy. Prosy means dull or tedious. I want you to think of a professor. Every time you go in there, you fall asleep. I want you to put rosies all over this guy, okay? Yeah, this professor who is dull or tedious is connected to prosy. How about this one? Let's go to French. Gâteau. Everybody say gâteau. Gâteau. Gâteau means cake. What could you visualize for gâteau? Yeah, a cake. No, you don't visualize a cat, unless you know Spanish. Good one. Thank you for that comment. If you don't know Spanish, what can you visualize in English for the word gâteau? Yeah, something that's got your toe. Visualize your big toe right now, and visualize a big cake with teeth grabbing your big toe. Now be nice to yourself. We don't have to be masochistic about this, okay? A big cake has got your toe. By the way, is cake masculine or feminine? Why? It's in the water. By the way, just as a little review, what is connected to, let's say, bonnet? What's after giraffe? Number 3 looks like a? What does number 3 look like? Yeah, you were all on automatic. Yeah, I can answer this one. When you went shopping, what's in your kitchen? Yeah, isn't that amazing? You're just picking up this information. Well, let's go on to a few more. Let's go to foie. Everybody say foie. Foie. Foie is cold. You know, I had a few people say this. Well, there's frost outside. I'm freezing. I had somebody else who said, I got into the shower, turned on the cold water, it hit me, and went, foie! Just a thought. Let's go with hacksaw. That's Greek. Hacksaw. I mean, that's simple. What can you visualize for hacksaw? Hacksaw. Now, this is a verb. It means to lead. So visualize. You're the leader of a band, and you got this big hacksaw. Okay, and you're walking down the middle of the... All right. Let's try this one. UB. How would you remember that UB in Japanese is finger? Tell the person sitting next to you how you would remember. UB is finger. Go ahead. Yeah. Now, I see a lot of you going like this. Now, I had to do that on purpose because you know what the problem is? If you go, you be good or something like that, you know what happens when you take the test? You'll go, you be. You'll go, you be good. Does UB mean good? UB. What does UB mean? It'll drive you nuts. So this is what I suggest you do. Take a picture for the word UB. A bumblebee in the shape of a U. It lands on your finger and it stings. Go with something concrete. In fact, let's take a Japanese character. Suppose you're learning Japanese for the very first time. Now, this isn't something you'd use if you're into advanced Japanese, but you're learning the symbols for the first time. Well, let's take the word hand. The word hand, the symbol is similar to that. Here's what I suggest you do. Make your hand that middle line. Everybody put your hand up. For the line above, it's smaller, so visualize a pen floating above your hand. Visualize a yardstick floating below your hand. And now take a nail, drive it through the pen, through your hand, between your fingers, and through the yardstick. And it bends at the end. I mean, that's a good way to just get started with some of those visualizations so you can start. Italian. Prosciutto. Everybody say prosciutto. Now, when you go into an Italian restaurant, you'll know that means ham. You know how you'll know that? I want you to visualize a pro football team. They all got their rifles, click, click. Every time a ham flies across the sky, they're all boom, boom. They're shooting down hams. Visualize that. Let's just go with one more. This is Korean. Ko. Everybody say ko. Now, if you add the letter L, it sounds like coal. I want everybody to take a piece of black coal and start rubbing it all over your nose. Go ahead, do that. That's okay, you know. No, everybody's going, are you going to do this too? All right. All right, let me give you another example. Let's suppose you're taking Physical Science 100, one of the funnest things in life. Acceleration is equal to force over mass. Now, when you see that, you go, well, that's simple. Acceleration, force over mass, force over mass, force over mass. You know what the professor does? He knows that's exactly what you do. You know what he does? He makes it a multiple choice test. Acceleration, is that equal to A, force over mass, or B, mass over force? Yeah, he tries to mess us up. Isn't that neat? Well, here's what you do. We can make a location out of this. What can you visualize for acceleration? A car. All right, I get to draw another one of my cars. All right, this is a sports car. You can tell it's sleeker. It's force over mass. Well, why not on top of the car you visualize Luke Skywalker fighting Darth Vader with the Force. And underneath that car, you got to visualize mass. Well, maybe there's a roommate you know of who's been eating a lot of donuts this semester, and they've developed a little mass. But they're happy. At least they seem that way. Another example. Speed is equal to distance divided by time. What can you visualize for speed? What do you mean, drugs? Let's go with this one. Let's go with a motorcycle. A motorcycle has a lot of speed. I can draw those too. Okay. It's a Honda. Don't laugh. Now, if it's distance divided by time, anybody here ever been on a cross-country team? You're called a distance runner. All right? So you visualize the motorcycle running into a distance runner, and his head goes through something that deals with time, which is a clock. Speed is equal to what? Distance divided by time. All right. Let me give you one more example. You see, when I was doing this for 10th graders, I was teaching them all of the chemical elements for the first time, and they were having a lot of fun. And one of the kids on the front row, I said, okay, AU is gold. And they all sat there and they thought for a minute, and one of the kids in the front row raised his hand. He says, I've got it. He said, I'm standing on all this gold. AU, look at my gold. Okay? Does that work? Did they have fun? Yes, and he was able to pass that test. Okay, just as a little review, I'm curious. What means given to fighting? Bellicose, okay? What does gâteau mean? Cake. What is froid? Cold. What is hacksaw? To lead. What is UB? Prosciutto. Acceleration is equal to? Force over mass. Speed is equal to? Distance divided by time. You see, those are the keys. That, in fact, could you imagine if that had been a multiple choice test, how much even simpler that would be? Well, I want to just conclude with one more thing. Let's talk about names and faces. You see, here's one of the biggest problems with names and faces. Somebody will start introducing you to individuals, and they'll do something just like this. Hi, I want you to meet everybody. I know these aren't your names, but this is Ken and Jim and Diane and Sue, and then they walk away. And you know what's happening? You're sitting there going, oh, geez, I'm sorry, but I forgot your name. You didn't forget their name. You never knew it in the first place. You didn't. In fact, doesn't this always happen? This always happened. How you doing? You know what? I recognize your face, but your name, I can't remember. Doesn't that always happen? This never happens. Jim, how the heck are you? I remember your name, but your face. Sorry. You see, that doesn't ever happen. Dale Carnegie said, the sweetest sound to an individual's ear is the sound of their own. He said the greatest compliment you can give an individual is to remember their. So here's a couple ways that you can remember names and faces. Number one, get the name. That is so important. Somebody says, hi, my name's John. Well, you get the name, John. In fact, here's what else I suggest. Ask him a question using his name. Well, John, where are you from? So number two is you repeat the name. Now, while John's telling you where he's from, by the way, he's flattered. The last 45 people didn't care. They just went ahead and forgot his name. While he's telling you a little bit something, you're going to go on to step three. You're going to visualize the word John. Now, that's simple. Has everybody got it? I thought so. Okay. So you visualize your little commode. Now, the fourth thing you do is you visualize, you pick a facial feature. You see, it's different for everyone. Let me give you just some examples. Don't even try to write all these down. It could be a big nose, a small nose, whatever grabs your attention first. It could be their eyes, big, beautiful eyes, squinty eyes, slanted eyes. It could be eyebrows that go across. It could be a zit. Now, the problem with the zit goes away. You don't know who this person is. Something a little bit more concrete. All right. Now, by the way, the last step is to take that visualization and connect it to the facial feature. Now, I would suggest when you're practicing this, learning new people's names and faces, and you're giggling, don't tell them why you're giggling, okay? You're trying to make friends here. Well, I used to do this with the first row. And it was a little embarrassing, and I didn't quite understand why until I used myself as an example. I said, I want everybody to focus in on my facial features. What is something a little unusual? Dangerous question. Had a gal in the front row, Bob. You know, when you're standing there, you know, your mouth is just kind of tilted. She said, shall I go on? She said, I see this little bobber bobbing down your tilted face, and there's a little kitten telling everybody about your tilted face. I said, that's enough. So I learned that day, don't embarrass anybody out there. So I decided to bring my buddies along. And I'm going to have you remember them. The first person you're going to meet, his name is Mark. How can you visualize a Mark? Yeah, a check mark, a marking pen. What's something just a little bit unusual about Mark? Don't say his eyes. Well, if his name's Mark, why not just shove a marking pen up his nose? Picture that for a second, okay? Because we'll test you on these. Here's the second person I want you to meet. His name is Ray. How can you visualize the word Ray? A ray gun, okay? What's something a little unusual about Ray? Yeah, he's bald. I want you all to pick up a ray gun and shoot off all his hair. Go ahead. Have a good time. Pick up that ray gun right now. All right, shoot off his hair. The next person you're going to meet, his name is Scott. What can you visualize for the word Scott? Yeah, Scotch tape. What's something a little unusual? Yeah, he's got a very orange beard. Scotch tape his beard together. Okay, some of you might have seen ears. Scotch tape his ears out. All right, here's our next individual. This poor gentleman's name is Jack. I want you to visualize taking the jack out of the back of your car and jacking up his cheeks. Okay? This is Paul. Paul. Now here's what you might do. You might visualize Paul with his curly hair. You're trying to walk through his curly hair to get to the mall. Paul rhymes with mall. Let's just go with one more. This is Molly. Yeah, obviously it's her lips. Molly rhymes with what? Lolly. Take a big old lollipop and stick it on her lips, all right? Now here's what I like about this technique. Let's say during the course of the day you met 12 or 13 new acquaintances. You jotted their first names down. You can actually review these people without the individuals being there anymore. For instance, suppose you're home, you're looking at the list of people you met today. Close your eyes, by the way. And in your mind's eye, I want you to visualize Mark. Can you see him? He just jumped out. How about Ray? How about Scott? How about Jack? Paul? Molly? Martha? Okay, I'm just kidding on Martha. But you see, now the next day when you're walking around, you walk up to and you say, hey, how's it going? What's happening? What are you doing at this party? They came together. Who's this? Who's this? And guess who this was? Okay, that's how you remember names and faces. Now, how many of you ever took typing? Can I see your hands? Do you remember the good old days? F, 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 space, G, G, G. At that point in your illustrious typing career, if you had to get a letter off to one of your friends or neighbors or relatives, would you type it? No, my gosh, it would take forever. You would go to longhand because it's quicker than your typing abilities. But those of you that stuck with typing, now maybe you type 50, 60, 70, maybe more than that, words per minute, now you've got to get a letter off quickly. Would you go back to the old method, longhand? You would type it because that is smarter, not harder. That is a great analogy that's been used with memory techniques. In the next 10 years, memory training is supposed to be one of the top 2 training programs in the United States. Never go back to the old way of memorization again. One final point. I was giving a lecture one time at a university, and I happened to overhear a couple of students talking after the presentation, and they said, let's not tell anybody else about this. We'll blow all the grades on the curve. Well, you know, it's kind of a fun thing to think about, but geez, I hope that's not your intention. You know, one of the greatest quotations, one of my favorite of all time is by Mark Twain when he said, what do we live for, if not to make life less difficult for those who follow? Please use your talents, your blessings, your abilities, newfound skills to make the lives of those who follow you easier. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.